We're in Acts chapter 12 today, so if you have your Bibles you can turn there, otherwise you can follow on the screen. It's been I've really enjoyed going through the book of Acts and seeing the early church and the struggles that they went through, the things that they overcame, and how God was faithful through it all. And so today we're going to continue in verse 1 of chapter 12, and this is telling kind of a story of two of the apostles. One is very short at the beginning and has what we would consider a sad ending, and then we have a longer description of a second one, Peter, with a positive meaning. And so we're going to read through this, and as we go through, at the end we'll be looking at why is this that we see one person who ends up dying a martyr's death, another person where God rescues, and why sometimes do we pray and we see miraculous answers to prayer, why sometimes we pray and it feels like nothing happens. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. So if you want to follow along in chapter 1. There we go. It was about this time that King Herod arrested some who belonged to the church, intending to persecute them. He had James, the brother of John, put to death with the sword. Then he saw that this met with approval among the Jews. He proceeded to seize Peter also. This happened during the festival of unleavened bread. After arresting him, he put him in prison, handing him over to be guarded by 4 squads of 4 soldiers each. Herod intended to bring him out for public trial after the Passover. So here we see up to this point, there was a bit of persecution. Everybody spread, and then there was a time of peace of the church in Jerusalem. And now persecution has come back in. So King Herod, and I believe this is the grandson, or great-grandson of the Herod that was alive when Jesus, or who was in power when Jesus came to be born, and the one who sent his soldiers to Bethlehem, and they killed all the boys under the age of 2 years old. So this is not the same Herod, even though it has the name, but he's also not a friend of Christianity, of the origins of recognizing who Christ really is. And so he begins to persecute the church again. We see him arresting a number of them, and then he puts to death James. So James and John, the brother of John, the sons of Zebedee, James, John, and Peter were the kind of the inner circle of the apostles with Jesus. When he had the 12, but when he went away with just a few of them, it was Peter, James, and John. So this was somebody who was very close to Jesus, and here we see him arrested, and he's put to death by the sword. Why did he die? Why didn't God rescue him? As we're going to see that God rescues Peter. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So Peter is arrested, and why he didn't get put to death immediately is because it was during the festival of unleavened bread, followed by the Passover, and it just wasn't seen as a good thing to do to actually put someone to death during that time. So he puts him into prison and waits till after these festivals to persecute him, to martyr him. And I guess he's learned this is the third time that Peter's been arrested. So he was arrested with John in Acts chapter 4. And at that time they're arrested, they go before the Sanhedrin, and they're just basically told not to continue to tell people about Jesus, and then they're released. The second time he's arrested is in Acts chapter 5, where it says the apostles. So assuming that Peter was one of the apostles at that point that was arrested, he's arrested, they're put in prison, an angel rescues him in the middle of the night, and then they leave, and the leaders find them again preaching in the synagogues, preaching about Jesus. And so that was the second time he was arrested, and maybe Herod has recognized the last time we arrested him, he got away. So this time he's putting him over to 4 squadrons of soldiers, of 4 soldiers each. So anybody good at math? 4 times 4? 16. Very good. So 16 soldiers all watching one person to make sure that he doesn't escape, that he doesn't get out. So he's awaiting to go out for public trial, make a big symbol out of him, and then looking at killing him. And so let's continue the story in Acts chapter 5. We're just going to finish reading the rest of the story here. And it says, so Peter was kept in prison, but the church was earnestly praying to God for him. The night before Herod was to bring him to trial, Peter was sleeping between two soldiers, bound with two chains, and sentries stood guard at the entrance. So that's how much they wanted to make sure he didn't escape, that he was actually chained between two soldiers, so that Peter goes anywhere, he's dragging two other guys with him, okay? And so he's chained there, and there's people watching. Suddenly, an angel of the Lord appeared, and a light shone in the cell. He struck Peter on the side and woke him up. Quick, get up, he said, and the chains fell off Peter's wrists. Then the angel said to him, put on your clothes and sandals. And Peter did so. Wrap your cloak around you and follow me, the angel told him. Peter followed him out of the prison, but had no idea that what the angel was doing was really happening. He thought he was seeing a vision. There's times you probably had visions or dreams and you kind of wake up and you're like, did that really happen? Did it not really happen? So Peter is all this time, he's thinking he's seen a vision. We've looked previously where he saw the vision of the cloth, the sheep being brought down from heaven with all the animals. So he's one who's had vision, so he thinks it might be a vision. Verse 10, then they passed the first and second guards. So they just walked right past them. The guards didn't even notice. And came to the iron gate leading to the city. It opened for them by itself, and they went through it. When they had walked the length of one street, suddenly the angel left him. So this was the first automatic gates in the Bible, where they walk up, kind of like you go to Bernardi's now, the gates just open wide up. So this is what happened back then. These metal gates just opened back up. It was about 2,000 years before they were invented. And God's power all through this story, we see how God walks Peter, provides for Peter's escape in a miraculous way. Okay, so what is he going to do? He's escaped. Then Peter came to himself and said, now I know without a doubt that the Lord has sent his angel and rescued me from Herod's clutches and from everything the Jewish people were hoping would happen. So remember at the beginning, the people were very pleased when James was killed. When they had drawn on him, when this had dawned on him, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, also called Mark, where many people had gathered and were praying. Peter knocked at the outer entrance, and a servant named Rhoda came to answer the door. When she recognized Peter's voice, she was so overjoyed, she ran back without opening it and exclaimed, Peter's at the door. I think that there's times where we have somebody coming over. When our kids were younger, they don't do this anymore, but when they're younger, they would be waiting at the door and watching, and then they'd come running to let us know that the people who'd finally arrived. And you're kind of like, well, let them in. But she got so excited about seeing Peter that she runs back to tell everyone and leaves him just standing on the front door. You're out of your mind, they told her when she kept insisting that it was so. They said it must be his angel. But Peter kept on knocking, and when they opened the door and saw him, they were astonished. Peter motioned with his hand for them to be quiet and described how the Lord had brought him out of prison. Tell James and the other brothers and sisters about this, he said, and then he left for another place. Just before I continue, I want to explain. So we just heard at the beginning that James has just been put to death. So this is a different James. There were two Jameses. There was James, the son of Zebedee, who is one of the apostles. But this second James, this is Jesus' brother. So when Jesus was alive, he didn't recognize Jesus for who he was. But once Jesus had died and was resurrected, one of Jesus' brother James became one of the leaders of the church. And that was the brother of Jesus, the one who wrote the book of James in the Bible. So he wants to make sure his brother and the other ones who aren't there know what has happened. So he's told that for them to share. So he's shared this story, and it's kind of ironic. Here they're having a prayer meeting, and you're praying earnestly, it says, for Peter's release. And then Peter's released, and what happens? They don't quite believe it, do they? They're astonished. well, God actually answered their prayers, and they're astonished. And I don't know about you, but there's been times where I've prayed something, I've seen God answer, and it's still kind of astonishing. Oh, God, you did it. Wow. And that's how their initial response is. Verse 18, in the morning there was no small commotion among the soldiers as to what had become of Peter. I can just imagine laying there, being chained to Peter. You wake up, bring up your chains. Where's Peter? The other guy's got his wrist. I don't have him either. And then they go to the guards, and he's just not there. After Herod had a thorough search made for him and did not find him, he cross-examined the guards and ordered that they be executed. So this was one of the kind of Roman traditions. If you were watching a prisoner and the prisoner got away, then whatever they were supposed to happen would happen to you. You'd be found guilty of whatever they were going to be found guilty of. And so Herod had those 16 soldiers all executed because they lost Peter, because Peter had escaped. There was really nothing they could do about it because God was involved. God is the one who brought him out. It wasn't really their fault, but Herod, being the kind of king he was, he put them all to death to be executed. It's a little at the end of the chapter. We'll just go through this quickly, but it talks about Herod and what ultimately happens to Herod. Then Herod went from Judea to Caesarea and stayed there. He had been quarreling with the people of Tyre and Sidon. They now joined together and sought an audience with him. After securing the support of Blastus, a trusted personal servant of the king, they asked for peace because they depended on the king's country for their food supply. On the appointed day, Herod, wearing his royal robe, sat on his throne and delivered a public address to the people. They shouted, "This is the voice of a God, not of a man." Immediately, because Herod did not give praise to God, an angel of the Lord struck him down, and he was eaten by worms and died. But the word of the God continued to spread and flourish. Just talk briefly about this last part before we jump back to the first part. This is the ultimate thing that happened to Herod. He was persecuting the church. He wasn't following God. Well, these people began to heap praises on him. And so he was allowing them, maybe he was thinking, maybe I'm kind of like a god, and he's enjoying it. But he did not stop them and say, I'm just a man. We see that over and over when the disciples, something miraculous would happen, God would move miraculously, and people would want to worship them, and they say, I'm just a man. It's Jesus that has done this. But Herod, he was quite happy for them to be worshiping him, and ultimately he died a death because of of not acknowledging God, because he was letting the people worship him. Because we are called to worship only one person, and that is God the Father and Jesus and the Holy Spirit, the Godhead. We are to worship. We're not to worship any men, any images. It's very clear in the Ten Commandments. And so Herod didn't follow that, and he had a very interesting death by worm. And this is also recorded by Josephus, who is a Jewish historian, about Herod's death, so it's not only a biblical source that records this. And so Herod's death is recorded in other places. So as we look back at these chapter of, as I said, this contrast between James and Peter. Peter, who was rescued miraculously, James, who had passed away. And all of us have at times prayed and seen God answer in very real ways, and in times where we have prayed earnestly, like these early disciples did, and we don't see God answer. So why is that? Why do we see God answer sometimes and not answer other times? And there's not a real easy answer for this question, apart from that God is God. God is all-knowing, and we are not. When I think of why didn't God answer my prayer, I'm thinking of it from my perspective. not from a perspective of we don't see healing. Even if the healing doesn't come, we're still going to trust in God. You know, as I said, we've all prayed for somebody who we really, really wanted to see healed, and we didn't see that healing come. The healing didn't come. But as a believer, yes, we can be saddened. Yes, we can be disappointed. There's nothing wrong with those things. But we need to trust that God knows better than we do, and that He is in control, and His plan is ultimately a plan where we see in Revelation the plan is that we will get to be, or that He wins, that He's going to come and bring us back to Him. And I also think that there's times where we see death differently than the way God sees death. Too many times we see death as final. Yes, it's final in the physical, but particularly for someone who's a believer, death is really the beginning. And while we are saddened by someone's death, we as believers can at times, we know that, well, there's a better place for us afterwards. And when the Lord wants to take me home, whatever that time is, whether I'm 41, 42, whether I'm 81, 82, the Lord will take me home in His timing. And I know where I'm going, and it's going to be a better place. And whenever He's going to take me home, that's between Him and I guess me, or really up to Him. And until that time, I'll continue to serve Him and trust in Him. Another song that came to mind was a song by Jeremy Camp. I don't know if you might have seen the movie, I Still Believe, which came out just over the last year or so. If you haven't, I would recommend finding some place where you can stream it. It's very powerful. So Jeremy Camp is a Christian singer in the States, and he lost his first wife to cancer, and he, even at concerts with hundreds, thousands of people, had people praying for her healing, and she did pass away. And he wrote this song, I Still Believe. And it says, I still believe in your faithfulness. I still believe in your truth. I still believe in your holy word. Even when I don't see, I still believe. And this was a song he wrote in that heartache of losing his wife. He still believed in God, still believed in who He was. And at times, as I said, we don't understand why God does things. Why does He answer our prayers some? Why does He not answer our prayers at other times? But ultimately, when we pray, our prayers should be in submission to Him, to His plan, to what He is doing, because He is God. He is all-knowing. He knows more than us. He knows the big picture. In Scripture this last week, we've been talking about lookouts, where when you go to a lookout, you can see the big picture. You go to Church Hill, you can see almost all of Blaney. You see the big picture of the town. And God, in some ways, He's up on the lookout, where He can see everything going on, all that's happening. We're on the street, and we can look around. I can stand on the front seat, I can look down this way, but I can't even see even close to all of Blaney from the front of our church building. But God, He sees everything, He knows everything, and He knows what should happen. He knows what's part of His plan. And I trust in Him, even when the healing doesn't come, even when my prayers aren't answered the way I think He should answer them. As Jeremy Camp says, I still believe. So we should still believe in Him and trust in Him and rely on a God who is greater than us and bigger than us. Because if He wasn't, why would we want to serve Him? Why would we want to serve a God that was just like us? We serve a God who is bigger, who is powerful, who does answer our prayers, but ultimately has a plan that's greater than any one of us. A plan to bring salvation, bring people to Him, so that when the day when He returns, we can go and be with Him. Let's pray. Father, at times it is difficult for us to understand why some prayers are answered and others aren't. difficult to understand when we see good Christian people suffering. Lord, may we first admit that we aren't you. We're not God. Our view of things can be faulty. Our view of things is corrupted by our sin, is corrupted by our finiteness. Lord, may we submit to what you are doing in our lives, in our church, in the lives of those around us. Lord, I thank you for the times where we pray earnestly and we see those prayers answered. Lord, may we also be thankful in times where we don't see our prayers answered, because in those times we can submit to you and your plan that is bigger than us, even if we don't understand, even if it hurts. Lord, I want to pray for people here who might be carrying a bit of anger for times where they didn't see you answer prayers. Pray for people who might be disappointed or confused. Lord, help us to lay those emotions down. Lord, they're very real emotions and can be legitimate things for what we've gone through. Lord, help us to submit to you and trust in you, and knowing that your plans and purposes are greater than ours. May we trust in you. In Jesus' name.